Today, I kind of wanted to talk to you about some of my favorite, like, YA fantasy books, because I really still enjoy YA books. Like, I might be 30-something, but I still enjoy a good YA story every once in a while. Some of my favorite books are YA fantasies. And I think just because they are like targeted to a younger audience, that doesn't mean there's nothing that adults can get out of them, because a lot of these are just really enjoyable books. Like I said, some of them are my absolute favorite just books of all time, regardless of being YA or adult. I just enjoy a good story, a good plot line, some good magic, and we're good and we have a good time. So these are some of the YA books that I think are just fantastic. I think adults would like them. If you read adult fantasy typically, I think some of these you would still enjoy, especially one of them. There's one in particular that I think is almost adult. It is definitely perfect for people that like only read adult fantasy. Read this too. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, these are just some really good YA books that I think that more people will enjoy if you just kind of like put to the side the fact that like, oh, it's YA. Like, it's just a good fantasy book. Like, put the age range aside and just check it out, because you might surprise yourself. The first one that I want to talk about is This Savage Song, which is the first book in the Monsters of Verity duology by V.E. Schwab. If you've watched me for any amount of time, you know I love V.E. Schwab. I have loved every single book that I've read that she has written, and this is no exception. She writes under Victoria when she writes for YA and middle grade, so this is sold as by Victoria Schwab. But it is so good. It is such a unique fantasy story. Like, we're following two different perspectives, and one is a human, one is a monster. What's really cool is that we're seeing like who are the real humans and what makes a human and what makes a monster, because some of our monsters are pretty human and some of our humans are pretty monstrous. And I really love this. There's actually like no romance in this, and I love that even more, because I don't think that a story always needs to have romance. Sometimes I really appreciate just a real good friendship between a boy and a girl, and that's what this book gave me, and I just love it so much. Another really fun YA book is Ash Princess. This is one that I read last year. I absolutely loved. I still need to read the rest of the trilogy, but book one was really good. It is kind of tropey, like there's a love triangle and like stuff like that, but honestly, I still had so much fun with this book. I really enjoyed the writing. I read it quickly and I liked the romance in it. I thought it was done well, even for a like love triangle. I thought it was really interesting. In this, we're following our main girl who is a princess, and her entire family was slaughtered in front of her while she watched, and they basically, the invaders kept her as like a prize. They kept her to basically keep her people in tow. And if there's like a rebellion or people start to rise up, like the current monarchy will like beat her publicly. And it will kind of keep the people in line because they don't want their princess to be abused. And it is so good. I really want to read the rest of the series this year. That's one of my goals, is to complete series that I've started, and this is one of them, and I need to get to it. The next one on my list of amazing YA books is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in a trilogy about teen superheroes, and I absolutely loved it. We're following one girl who is from the anarchists, who are the bad guys, and she is infiltrating the Renegades, who are the good superheroes, and it's just so cool. I loved it. I really loved book one. I loved book two. Book three kind of let me down, but it was still good. So it's still a series I would highly recommend. We follow just like a really cool cast of characters, and I just enjoyed it, and it's just one of those YA books that's like, you know what? I had fun. And did it have a whole lot of substance? No. But was it a lot of fun? Yes. I also really love Crown of Feathers by Nikki Palpretto. This is the first book in a trilogy. I read book 2 this past year, and then book 3 is coming out super soon, and it is so good. This is one of those YA fantasies that really pushes the limit to being a more adult fantasy. One thing that really elevates this book, in my opinion, is the fact that it is multi-POV. And I feel like multi-POV is something that we get more so in adult fantasy. We don't get it as much in YA, and I wish we did get more multi-POV in YA, and this gives it to me. We are following Veronica. Her and her older sister want to be phoenix riders. They are both animages, so they can speak to animals, but magic is banned in their world. And they're trying to kind of figure out a way to hatch a phoenix and find a phoenix and start kind of their life over. And they kind of come to blows, and Veronica leaves and joins this group of phoenix riders that she finds, but she has to pretend to be a boy in order to do so. And it is such a good book. There's so much political intrigue, and I just love the relationships in this. And I'm really excited to see how the series ends this year. Next, we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. If you have been around here, you know how much I love Brandon Sanderson, and his YA books are no different. I absolutely loved this, and Starsight, the second book, is so good. We should be getting book 3 later in the year as well, but this is going to be a 4-book series, a quartet, a quadrilogy. I don't know what we call that. I guess a quartet. Quadrilogy I don't think is a word. I think I just made that up. Either way, we're getting book 3. And we all know that Brando Sando writes like a madman. Like, he just pumps out books left and right. This is about Spensa, and she is a human living on this planet, and they're all living kind of like underground. And basically, like, the best of society are pilots, and they're fighting kind of this ongoing war with the Krell, who are these like aliens that they never really see. And she wants so badly to be a pilot, but because her dad was a pilot that deserted, she is like looked down upon and not allowed to pursue her dreams. But she kind of manages to get in and starts learning some new things about her dad and about herself and about, you know, the world at large. So this is a really, really cool series, and I absolutely love it. If you are a fan of fantasy romance, then you'll want to read Awakens by Elise Kova. This is a YA fantasy romance, and I just loved every last bit of it. This is actually a self-published series. Like, as you can see, there are 5 books, but they're all like super short, so it's definitely a quick read. And it's on Kindle Unlimited too, if you want to read it that way. You don't have to buy the hardbacks. You can read it on Kindle Unlimited for free with your subscription. But this follows Vala, and she is a library assistant, and she's just kind of a library assistant in the palace, stays to herself, minds her own business, and then one day she ends up kind of inadvertently saving a prince and discovering that she has magic that hasn't been seen in hundreds of years, and hijinks ensue. And this is such a good series. Book 1 is kind of tropey. It's kind of your typical YA fantasy romance. After that, it kind of goes off the rails. Like, it really delves more into a darker territory in books 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I loved that about it. We really get to follow Vala and her struggles, and there's war, and there's cost of war, and there's like really cool elemental magic, and it's just a series that I absolutely love. I'm actually rereading this with the shelf published in right now, so I just remembered how much I loved it the first time, and I'm loving it again the second time. Then we have another one, and that is Where Dreams Descend. This is like a YA fantasy with a competition, and it's very circusy, and like, I just loved it. We are following our main character who just wants to get out of this house that she's kind of trapped in. She's kind of trapped in this like house in the middle of nowhere where it's like a club, and she's doing like performance magic kind of like every night, like a showgirl. but she ends up escaping and going to this big city and entering this magic competition, and like she's the only girl in it, and it's so good. There's a really, really good romance in this book that I absolutely love. So if you like a fantasy romance competition, but the romance isn't like super, super heavy, I highly recommend picking this up. Again, the second book comes out soon, and I think it is just a duology. So highly recommend picking this up before book 2 comes out. And then finally, do you remember me telling you there's that one YA book that you need to read even if you don't read YA, even if you're like, no, Jess, I only read adult fantasy, like I don't like YA. This book is one that you need to try, and that is Fireborn by Rosario Munda. This is a YA fantasy, but it is definitely good for adults who only read adult fantasy. My friend Alan at the Library of Alexandria does not read YA, does not read romance. He loved this book and the sequel. So if that doesn't tell you something, like, you need to get it, man. This is like a Russian Revolution inspired fantasy with dragons. Like, need I say more? I actually have an entire review for this book. I will link that below. And then I also did an interview along with Alan and Elliot Brooks on her channel, and Ashley from Don't Have a Degree in Reading. We did an interview with Rosario Munda for the release of Flamefall. So I will link that below as well. That was so much fun. The author is just so kind, and you get some like really cool insight into the book. It's non-spoiler. Highly recommend picking this one up. Like, YA, fantasy, revolution, and dragons. What else do you need? All right, well, those are some of my favorite YA books, the ones that I just will recommend time after time, and I think everybody should take a chance and read, especially if you like are kind of on the fence, like you're like, maybe I'm too old to read YA. Pick some of these up, because I am old and I like them. I am a mom of 2 in my 30s, and I enjoyed these YA books. Alan is a like 39-year-old man who only reads adult fantasy, and he really liked Fireborn, so that should be a testament into that book specifically. So just pick them up, just try them. You never know until you try, right? All right, thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will see you next time. Bye.